The vote was already at 412 when I stopped counting. Not because I lost track. I stopped because the number had already crossed the line I had calculated 8 months ago, sitting in a hotel room on Velcar Prime, eating something that tasted like wet cardboard and smelled like engine fluid. The night I understood that this moment was coming, and that nothing I said in this chamber would change its direction. 612 civilizations were represented in this room. 900 delegates packed into a structure that smelled like a tide pool baking in the sun. I had been sitting in this exact seat for 3 years. I knew which atmospheric scrubbers were broken. I knew which delegate from the Ossic hegemony took bathroom breaks during critical votes. He did not take one today. My name is Lena Cole, Earth's ambassador to the galactic community, a title that sounds significant until you understand what it actually means. It means you sit at a table engineered for everyone except you. It means you file petitions that vanish into review periods measured in years. It means you stand before 600 civilizations and represent 8 billion people to a body that has spent 4 decades deciding whether humanity qualifies for the paperwork. Today, they had reached their conclusion. Chief Arbiter Sunva read the charges in the careful, measured voice of someone who had practiced sounding reluctant. Earth's militarization rate, never precisely defined, consistently cited. Our refusal to submit biotech research to Council oversight, research we had offered to share, but not surrender. The incident at Meridian Station, which 3 separate civilizations had filed formal trauma complaints about, and which the official record described in language constructed so carefully that no individual or governing body would ever be held specifically accountable for what had actually happened there. I had not requested speaking time. Everything I needed to say I had already said. 12 years, 407 formally filed objections, 219 diplomatic correspondence chains reviewed, acknowledged, and placed into the institutional equivalent of a drawer that no one opened. I had said all of it through the correct channels, in the correct language, with the appropriate documentation attached and verified. It had produced the vote I was watching now. The indicator lights above each delegation seat shifted from neutral to amber as each civilization registered their position. The amber spread the way damage spreads, starting at the center, moving outward, until it occupied more of the room than anything else. 400. 500. 560. I did not lean forward. I did not grip the arms of my chair. I sat with the stillness that does not come from calm. It comes from knowing exactly what you do next. 612. The single abstention was the Breath Collective, who abstained from everything as a matter of philosophy. I had once asked their senior delegate whether the Breath ever voted yes on anything. He told me the Breath believed certainty was a form of arrogance. I told him that was a comfortable philosophical position for a species that did not need other civilizations' votes to survive. He had not spoken to me directly since. The cost of that had been 0. Chief Arbiter Sunva held the result for 4 full seconds before reading it aloud. A theatrical choice. The Velcari were good at theatrical. The motion carries, he said. Earth is formally placed under protective isolation. Trade sanctions will take effect within 1 standard cycle. Travel restrictions are immediate. A corrective period of no less than 50 standard cycles is hereby imposed. 50 cycles. The chamber released a collective sound that traveled through 900 bodies in 900 different ways. A loosening, a settling, whatever relief sounds like when you translate it across a dozen physiologies at once. The Velcari legal team was already moving documents. The Ossic delegation communicated through the low-frequency vibrations their species uses when they do not want the conversation followed. I pulled out my tablet. The delegate closest to me, young Velcari, with the wide, light-capturing eyes his species develops for deep space navigation, glanced over. I felt what he was expecting. A protest. An emergency motion. some visible response that would confirm for everyone present that the vote had landed with the weight the chamber intended. I typed 11 words into a secure channel. Green light, all nodes, confirm receipt and report status. Sent. I looked up at the young delegate. He looked away. The diplomatic liaison assigned to manage Earth's formal exit from the community reached me 2 minutes after the vote closed. A senior Velkari official with a face built for difficult conversations. The kind of face that develops in people whose job is to deliver outcomes that damage others while maintaining the impression that the damage is regrettable and ultimately in everyone's interest. He began a prepared statement about transition support resources, liaison offices, a community-funded adjustment period for Earth's economy. I closed my tablet. "Here's the thing," I said. He paused mid-sentence. "You just voted to exile a species that has been building a separate table for 8 years. I held that in the space between us. You did not exile us. One breath. You freed us from the waiting list." The prepared statement left his face completely. What replaced it was a calculation, the visible, specific recalculation of a person who has just discovered that the map they were carrying does not describe the terrain they are standing in. My tablet pulsed short once. Confirmed, all 47 nodes active and clean, Petra. I read it, closed the screen. I stood up. The chamber continued behind me. 900 conversations about what came next for Earth, none of which included any input from Earth. The amber lights had returned to their neutral blue, but the room felt amber anyway, something in the air pressure, something in the weight of all that relief pressing outward toward the walls. I walked toward the exit, 200 feet of polished stone sourced from a quarry on a planet I had never visited. My footsteps made no sound. The Velkari designed this building to make visitors feel the weight of its age, to make them feel small inside something vast and permanent and far older than they were. I had always found the effect somewhat overstated. I did not look back at the chamber. There was nothing behind me I had not already planned for. In the corridor outside, the air was cleaner and direct. The escort caught up with me at the first junction, 6 Velkari enforcement officers with the practiced formation of people who believed they were performing containment. Their lead officer informed me, with genuine courtesy, that Earth's diplomatic credentials had been suspended effective immediately, and that he was authorized to ensure my orderly departure from community facilities. "Copy that," I said. I kept walking. They kept pace. They believed they were escorting me out. They were not. The corridor that led from the convocation chamber to the transit hub was 400 meters long and designed to feel longer. The Velkari architects had done something subtle with the ceiling. It dropped incrementally as you walked, creating a subconscious sense of compression, of available space narrowing with each step. The psychology of it was probably quite effective on species that experience spatial pressure as emotional pressure. I had measured the ceiling drop on my 3rd week in this building, filed it away. I file most things away. The escort maintained their formation, 3 paces behind me on each side. Standard, polite. Their lead officer had the careful body language of someone briefed that the subject might be volatile and was visibly relieved to find her walking in a straight line without incident. I was simply walking in a straight line. The incident was elsewhere. My comms were receiving everything. 26 messages since the vote closed. Sol Command. Earth's Relay Station. 2 news organizations that should not have had this channel but did because they always find a way. Owen Hart, my legal advisor, whose preview read as expected, standing by. Director Neil Sutton from Earth's Foreign Affairs Office, whose message preview read, "Lena, what is happening?" which told me the relay data was already moving and word was traveling ahead of the official announcement. I opened one message, Petra Wells short. All 47 active, 0 interference, 0 flags from community monitoring. They have not noticed yet. How long do we have? I typed back long enough. Here is what the galactic community understood about Earth as of 15 minutes ago. We were a capable species with a notable military development curve, a persistent refusal to accept multilateral oversight of our research programs, and a history of handling disagreements more directly than the community's conflict resolution protocols preferred. A problem. A stubborn one. The kind you eventually quarantine and correct. Here is what they did not understand about Earth. We had spent 16 years studying how the infrastructure of their civilization actually held together, and we had spent 8 years building a layer of it that we controlled. The galactic community's deep space relay network was old. The oldest sections had been in operation for over 4 centuries, maintained initially by the Velkari, then delegated across generations into a structure of contracts and subcontracts and automated maintenance systems that no single entity fully understood anymore. The Velkari knew their sections. The Osik knew the junctions their trade depended on. The Breath monitored their own communication corridor. No one possessed a complete map of the whole. We had built one. 16 years of mapping. Every corridor, every junction, every traffic pattern and redundancy gap and aging component in the network. We had identified 47 specific intersections, the points where the highest volume of interstellar trade and communication crossed, and we had built new relay nodes at each one, in open interstellar space, which fell under no jurisdiction. Registered under the community's own standard infrastructure classification system, where they appeared in the directories as generic relay additions, unattributed, unremarkable, and completely overlooked. It violated no law on record. Because the laws on record were written when humanity was still developing its first FTL drive, no one had thought to prohibit this specific thing, because no one had imagined a species doing it quietly, over 8 years, without once announcing the intention. We had imagined it, we had done it, and 20 minutes ago we had turned it on. My comms opened. Hank Briggs at Sol Command, I answered. Tell me it's clean, he said. No greeting. Hank never wasted time on greetings. Petra confirmed it. 47 nodes, no flags yet. Window. Enough, they are recalling me to the chamber now. A pause, short. Hank absorbs information the way good commanders do completely, without performing the process. You ready for that room again, he said. I thought about the chamber, the amber lights spreading across 612 delegation seats, the sound of 900 bodies releasing tension they had been holding since Earth's application went into its 4th decade of review, Sunva's rehearsed reluctance, 50 cycles, protective isolation. I have been ready for that room for 12 years, I said. I heard him exhale, not relief, the specific breath of a person who has been waiting a long time for something to either work or fail, and who knows, even now, that it is not fully decided yet. Lena, he said. He stopped, started again. Your mother would have. Copy that, I said. I ended the call. My mother had petitioned for Earth's full community membership in 2089. She spent 14 years navigating the process, filing, attending consultations, translating the community's procedural language into something humans could respond to, then translating humanity's responses back into something the community would accept. She did it with the patience of someone who genuinely believed that if you built the right argument and presented it through the right channels and demonstrated clearly that you deserved to be included, the system would respond to that. That the system was, at its core, designed to respond to that. She died in 2107. Still processing. I had not become a diplomat because I believed in the process. I had become a diplomat because I understood it. There is a significant difference between those two things. One is faith, the other is reconnaissance. The escort slowed at a secondary corridor junction. The lead officer's comms unit activated. He listened. Something reorganized in his posture, not alarm, but the specific adjustment of a person receiving information that changes the parameters of their current assignment. He turned to me. "Ambassador Cole," he said. The title was technically no longer accurate, but he used it anyway. Habit or professionalism or both. "The Convocation has issued an emergency recall. Chief Arbiter Sunva has requested your immediate return to the chamber. The stated basis is an infrastructure concern." "Infrastructure concern," I said. "Yes." I looked at him for a moment. He was doing his job correctly, and he clearly felt the situation had moved past what his job had prepared him for, which was not something I held against him. "Copy that," I said. I turned around. I walked back toward the chamber. The escort, which had been absolutely certain 12 minutes ago that they were escorting me out, reformed without a word and moved with me in the opposite direction. I gave them credit for the professionalism. As I walked, I thought about Petra Wells at 29 years old, standing in front of Earth's Foreign Affairs Committee, presenting the node concept, watching the committee use the word ambitious in the specific way that institutions use it when they mean, "This will not be funded." She had gone back to her lab with 7 people and a budget that would not have covered the catering at one of the community's annual summary conferences. 8 years later, she sent me 2 words. "It's ready." I had read those 2 words at my desk in the community facility I was no longer allowed to call home, sitting in the quiet of a late orbital evening, and I had felt something I had been careful not to name. "Currency you have not yet confirmed is real should not be spent." I had filed the feeling away with everything else I was carrying. The chamber doors were ahead. The first time I walked through them, I had been carrying 40 years of Earth's patience on a structure that had been fracturing for a long time. This time I was carrying terms. The chamber looked different on re-entry. Not physically. The stone was the same stone, the ceiling the same calculated height, the broken atmospheric scrubbers on the east wall still broken, but 900 bodies that had settled into the comfortable weight of a concluded decision had reorganized into something considerably less comfortable. Delegates had moved into clusters that had not existed before I left. Conversations that had been running at the relaxed pace of business concluded now moved fast and low and close. I knew that pace. I had seen it in briefing rooms before outcomes changed. Chief Arbiter Sunva was standing. He did not stand during sessions that were not in formal record. Standing was reserved for moments that required visible gravity. I walked to the center floor. Not to the ambassador's bench, which was technically no longer my seat, to the speaker's position. The raised section, slightly elevated from the chamber floor, designed so that when a delegate addressed the full chamber, every delegation could see them clearly. I stood on it. Sunva looked at me for 2 full seconds without speaking. His expression held the particular arrangement of features a Velkari elder shows when they are aware that the expected shape of a situation has not materialized. "Ambassador Cole," he said, "our infrastructure monitoring has flagged a significant anomaly across the deep space relay network. 47 new relay nodes have registered active status in the major trade corridors. The authentication layer on 11 primary junctions has been redirected through Earth-registered infrastructure. We are requesting an explanation." "Sure," I said. Earth built 47 relay nodes over 8 years in open interstellar space, registered them under your standard infrastructure classification system, and activated them approximately 25 minutes ago. The chamber was very quiet. "The Velkari Pharmaceutical Distribution Network routes through Corridor 7, I continued. "Our node at that junction is now the primary authentication point for all traffic on that route. The OSIC hegemony's commercial shipping depends on junctions 2, 9, and 14. We have operational nodes at all 3. The Breath Collective's communication network runs through the central hub at Sector 40. Our node there is the most powerful unit in that zone by a factor of 3. The Murat Strands data relay uses junctions 21 and 32. We cover both. The Ahun Trade Federation's primary cargo corridor runs through junction 18. Our node there went live clean. I looked at the Velkari Commercial Committee representatives, who had arrived in the last 12 minutes, fast enough that several were still arranging their seating. None of this violates any law currently on the community registry, I said. Earth's legal team has verified the full construction and registration record against every applicable statute in your existing framework. All 47 nodes meet community infrastructure classification standards. All were built and registered within current interstellar property protocols. There is no legal mechanism available to this chamber to compel Earth to disable, surrender, or transfer operation of those nodes. I let that sentence reach every corner of the room before I continued. Owen Hart was near the chamber entrance. He had arrived at some point in the last few minutes, jacket slightly crooked, tablet already open, the expression of a man who had been preparing for a specific moment for 3 years and was now standing fully inside it. He raised 2 fingers. Confirmed. Owen Hart, Earth's chief legal advisor, has the complete regulatory record available and is prepared to review it with any legal scholars this chamber wishes to appoint, I said. The record will support everything I have just told you. The OSIC senior delegate produced a low, resonant sound his species makes when confronting information they had not prepared for. It traveled through the room. The Velkari commercial representatives were clearly receiving communications from their home offices. I could read the reorganization in their body language as the responses arrived, the specific recalibration of institutions calculating the cost of 2 different outcomes against each other. Sumva set his tablet down with great care. Ambassador Cole, he said, what is Earth proposing? Earth is not proposing anything. I reached into my jacket pocket and removed a data chip. I walked to the arbiter's table and placed it in front of him. Earth is delivering terms. The distinction matters. I would ask this chamber to keep it in mind throughout the rest of this conversation. I stepped back to the speaker's floor. For 40 years, Earth operated within the community's framework. We filed petitions. We attended reviews. We modified our research disclosure practices on 3 separate occasions, each time based on assurances that modifications would advance our membership application. They did not advance it. We submitted to 2 independent security assessments conducted by community-appointed teams, both of which cleared Earth of the specific concerns cited in this morning's vote. Those assessments were classified. They were never entered into the formal record. I looked across the full chamber. At no point in 40 years did this body treat Earth as a civilization with legitimate standing. We were processed. We were reviewed. We were told our concerns had been noted and that the process would continue. Today, that arrangement ends. I nodded toward the data chip. The file contains Earth's terms. They are complete and they are not modular. Earth's relay nodes remain under Earth's operation, with licensing agreements for continued access available at rates defined in Appendix 2. Earth's permanent arbiter seat on this council, with full voting rights, is effective immediately upon agreement. The incident at Meridian Station is to be officially reclassified in the community record to reflect what actually occurred. Earth's biotech research program continues under Earth's own oversight framework, with voluntary disclosure provisions outlined in Appendix 5. Section 3 addresses the suppressed security assessment reports. I would strongly suggest reading Section 3 before formulating a response. The chamber was silent for 4 seconds. Then it was not silent at all. They tried. I will give them that fully. 600 civilizations do not persist long enough to build an institution this old and this complex by being unintelligent. They know how to negotiate. They know how to apply pressure, find angles, redirect conversations without the other party fully understanding what has been moved. They are very skilled at all of those things. What they did not know was how to do any of them to someone who had spent 12 years learning how they worked. Sunva called a 30-minute recess. When the session resumed, 7 additional Velkari legal scholars were seated at the arbiter's table, plus 2 representatives from the Community Standards Authority, a body that existed, as far as I had ever been able to determine, primarily to generate documentation confirming that existing standards applied to whatever situation was currently in dispute. The senior legal scholar opened with the full framework argument, systematic, structured, and well-prepared. He used 14 minutes and covered precedent, historical context, and the position that Earth's node construction, while not explicitly prohibited under current interstellar property statutes, potentially violated the spirit of the community's infrastructure cooperation framework. The spirit of the framework. I waited until he finished completely. The spirit of the framework was written 2 centuries ago by species who had not yet made first contact with Earth, I said. Earth was not consulted on the spirit of the framework. Earth was not consulted on any of the foundational documents your team is currently citing. We were presented with those documents as conditions of a membership application that, as of this morning, has produced no membership after 40 years of active processing. I looked at Owen. He stepped forward. He placed a physical document in front of the senior scholar, then another, then 6 more precisely stacked. Legal analysis of every precedent cited, Owen said, with specific annotation to the sections that do not apply to Earth's construction activities because Earth was not a signatory to the originating agreements, all verified and time-stamped. The 3rd document in that stack references Section 19 of the community's own Infrastructure Development Charter, which provides direct positive legal support for independent node construction in open interstellar space, not subject to any existing territorial claim. The senior scholar looked at the stack of documents. He looked at Owen. He looked at the documents again. Owen returned to his position near the wall, picked up his coffee, and stared at the middle distance with the expression of a man running on very little sleep and the very specific energy that comes from doing work you have been building toward for 3 years and have finally been given permission to do in front of the people it was designed for. The legal argument ended. The OSIC delegation produced their threat 17 minutes later. Their senior delegate stood. His statement, rendered through the chamber's translation relay, described Earth's node activation as a destabilizing action that posed a direct threat to the security of established interstellar infrastructure, and noted that the OSIC hegemony maintained enforcement capability sufficient to address infrastructure threats of this nature under current community emergency security protocols. He framed it carefully as a statement of capability and legal authority, not as a declaration. He sat down. The chamber waited. I reached into my jacket pocket. I opened a specific file on my personal comm unit. I pressed play. The audio lasted 12 seconds. 2 voices, clear recording, speaking in OSIC, translated in real time by the chamber's universal relay system for every delegation present. A conversation between 2 senior OSIC military officers discussing the approach vector of an Earth survey vessel near the Meridian Station sector, the decision to initiate a boarding action on an unarmed civilian research craft, and the escalation that followed, which the officers described as having proceeded according to plan. 12 seconds. I stopped the playback. The full recording is 47 minutes, I said. Earth has held it for 6 years. It currently exists on 7 separate servers across 3 solar systems. Section 4 of Earth's terms addresses the official record correction for the Meridian Station incident. I would recommend reviewing Section 4 carefully before this delegation makes any additional statements. The OSIC senior delegate was completely still. The specific, deliberate stillness of a large, physically expressive species choosing, with considerable effort, not to express anything at all. He made no further statement. The Velkari commercial representatives had received communications from their home offices during the recess, and the responses had reorganized their body language in a way that was not difficult to read. The message that had come back was some form of, "Do not disconnect the nodes." Their own supply chain mathematics had spoken more directly than any position paper could. I turned back to Sunva. "The terms are complete," I said. "I am willing to clarify any section whose language requires it. That is different from modification, and I want to be precise about that difference." Sunva looked at me with the particular expression of a person who runs an institution that is currently being required to adapt faster than its design permits. From the back of the chamber, a voice asked for the floor. A young Velkari delegate. Outer system delegation, not the core authority. Young, for a Velkari, wide-eyed in the way that species only is when something has genuinely caught them without preparation. Sunva granted the floor. The delegate looked at me directly. He said, "Why did you not simply ask for this, all of it, years ago, before all of this became necessary?" The chamber was quiet. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about 219 correspondence chains that went into drawers. I thought about 2 security assessment reports cleared for return of membership application, and then classified from the formal record. I thought about a 47-minute audio recording held for 6 years, because the official documentation of what happened at Meridian Station described it as a navigational misunderstanding. I thought about a woman filling in boxes on a form at a kitchen table, believing in the right process with the specific faith of someone who cannot afford to believe that the process was never designed to let them through. "We did ask," I said. "We asked for 30 years." I held his gaze. "Then we stopped asking." The young delegate looked at me, then he looked down. He did not speak again. Sunva called for the vote 43 minutes later. No further legal challenges were raised. No additional statements from the OSIC delegation. The vote moved through the chamber species by species, as it had that morning, but the indicator lights above the delegation seats shifted to blue this time. 601 civilizations in favor of Earth's terms, with one modification to Appendix 2 that Owen had agreed to mid-session, and that I had reviewed and approved during the recess. 11 abstentions, 0 opposing votes. I stood on the speaker's floor and watched the blue spread across the chamber and felt something pass through me that I had no intention of nomming in a room with 900 observers. I noted it. I filed it. I would carry it the way I carried everything else below the operational layer, where it would not interfere with the work. "Thank you," I said to the chamber. The words were accurate. That was all they needed to be. I stepped down. Owen was near the exit. He handed me a coffee without speaking. Cold. I drank it without comment. We walked into the corridor and I held up one hand. He stopped beside me. I stayed still for 11 seconds. Then I straightened. I opened comms. Hank answered on the second pulse. "Done," I said. A pause, then, "How does it feel?" I thought about it. Like winning an argument with someone who ran over your dog 6 years ago and wrote the incident report themselves. A pause on his end. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, that sounds about right." I ended the call. There was work to do. 90 days later, I was in the middle of a trade mediation between the Ahun Federation and a Velkari commercial consortium, when I noticed the OSIC delegate had been watching me for 23 minutes. Not the way anyone had watched me in the chamber 2 days after the first vote, when every delegation in the building was actively trying to determine whether Earth was a threat, an opportunity, or something that did not fit cleanly into either category. This was different, quieter. He watched with the focused attention of someone working out a calculation they had not expected to need. I noted it. I continued the mediation. The AHUN representative was making a reasonable argument about corridor access fees that the Valkyrie Consortium would accept if someone with formal arbitration standing would create an independent framework both parties could reference. That was part of my new function, not solely Earth's voice in the chamber, but a standing arbitration presence with authority that operated independently of the community's standard resolution process. The Valkyrie Consortium had requested me specifically. 6 weeks earlier, they would not have accepted a human arbitrator in any capacity. I closed the mediation after 40 minutes. Both parties left with what they had come for. I did not frame that internally as a victory. It was a function. Functions you perform correctly until they become the expected condition of things, until the expected condition of things is different from what it used to be, and then you have changed something that does not announce itself. After the chamber cleared, the OSIC delegate crossed the floor toward me. He stopped at 2 meters, outside the standard OSIC interaction distance, which was a deliberate choice on his part. "Your people argue like you expect to lose," he said. I considered that. It was not an insult. The OSIC communicate through direct observation, they name what they see, and the nomming is the communication itself. "Yeah," I said, "habit." He looked at me for another moment, then he left. I carried that observation longer than the corridor required. We argue like people who have been losing and learned to be precise about it anyway. We argue like lawyers who built every case from secondary sources because the primary sources were never made available. We argue the way you argue when you know you are right, but the available channels were not designed to confirm you. All of those things were true, and they were the same observation arriving from different angles. Petra Wells came to the station on day 64. She did not travel often. She had a lab, a team, and the kind of focus that experiences transit time as hours removed from productive work. When she appeared at the station's receiving hub with a bag over one shoulder and the specific compressed look of someone who had been in a transport pod for 30 hours straight, I understood the visit was not casual. We ate in the station cafeteria. The food had improved since I had taken the arbitration post, because the supply chain now had better corridor access, which was a small irony I acknowledged without making anything of it. Petra ate efficiently, as she always does, then set her fork down and looked at me with the direct, undecorated attention she uses when something matters enough to warrant the trip. "Node 7 is degrading faster than projected," she said. "Traffic volume through the pharmaceutical corridor is running 40% above our usage models. We need either an upgrade to the existing node or a second unit in that sector." "Add the second unit," I said. "That is what I expected you to say. I need authorization and a budget allocation from your office." "Send the specs to Owen. He will process the authorization this week." She nodded. She looked at me a moment longer than the logistics required. "Are you doing all right?" she said. The question had weight behind it that the words themselves did not carry. Petra had known me for 9 years. She was the one who sent the message that read "It's ready." She had been awake for 31 consecutive hours on the day of the first vote, monitoring 47 nodes from a station 4 light minutes from the chamber, waiting to receive a single word back from me. She understood precisely what we had built and what it had taken, and what the second vote had and had not resolved. "I am working," I said. She accepted that answer without adjusting it. Petra has always understood the difference between an answer and a navigation around one, and she has always recognized when the navigation is itself the more honest thing. "The team would like to know if you are coming to the lab when you are next back on Earth," she said. "When I am next back, I will tell them to assume yes." "Tell them I said hello." She left the next morning. I watched her pod disconnect from the station bay and move into the departure corridor. I stood at the bay window for another few seconds after it was gone. Then I went back to work. Director Neil Sutton arrived on day 78 with a delegation of 4 and a prepared agenda running to 6 pages. Sutton was the kind of official who had spent his career inside institutions, comfortable with hierarchy, skilled at the diplomatic art of making constraints look like choices, and genuinely well-meaning in the way that people are when an institution has become the primary medium through which they perceive what is possible. He arrived with the careful, slightly reorganized energy of a person who has updated a significant understanding and is still integrating the update. We met in the station's formal conference room. It had a Velcari aesthetic, clean lines, mineral surfaces, designed to communicate permanence and authority. I had not changed any of it since taking the post. The room communicated what it communicated. I did not need to redecorate to change the conversation that happened inside it. Sutton moved through the agenda methodically. Relay node policy formalization, bilateral agreement governance framework, Meridian Station reclassification communications, the suppressed security assessment reports. On the security assessments, I stopped him mid-sentence. "Those go public," I said, "all of them unredacted." He checked his notes. The legal committee's recommendation was phased disclosure with a community impact assessment preceding each release. The legal committee's recommendation was designed to manage Earth's relationships within the community framework, I said. Those relationships have changed structurally. The reports go public, unredacted, on the timeline Earth's communications office determines is logistically sound. The people who were aboard the survey vessel at Meridian Station and the families of everyone involved in that incident deserve an accurate public record. That is not a policy position I am willing to negotiate. It is the minimum the situation requires. Sutton wrote something on his notepad. The room was quiet enough that the pen made a small sound. "All right," he said. We finished the full agenda in just under 2 hours. His delegation gathered their materials with the coordinated efficiency of people accustomed to formal settings. Sutton himself moved toward the door and then stopped. He had the posture of a person carrying one more thing and deciding carefully how to set it down. "It will take time," he said. "For people back on Earth, I mean, for the institutions. The way people understand what has changed, it will need time to become something they can actually live inside of, something they can build from." I understood exactly what he meant. Earth had spent 40 years inside a particular understanding of what was achievable, of what you could reasonably expect from the universe if you did everything correctly and waited long enough, and demonstrated clearly that you had earned inclusion. That understanding does not reorganize overnight because a chamber full of amber lights voted blue. It reorganizes slowly in people, one revised expectation at a time. "I know," I said. He nodded. He left. I sat alone in the conference room. I did not review the agenda or the session calendar or the relay node upgrade request. I thought about something specific and small and very clear. A woman at a kitchen table with a form in front of her, filling in every required box with careful handwriting, attaching every required document, sending it through the correct channel, and then beginning the work of waiting for a system she believed in to respond to her in kind. I thought about what that costs, over 14 years, what it costs a person to keep going back to that table, filling in boxes that ask the same questions, attaching documents that have already been reviewed and cleared and set aside, believing each time that this version of the effort might be the one the process recognizes. I sat with that for as long as it needed. Then I stood up, I straightened my jacket, I went back to work. The morning session on day 91 was a territorial boundary dispute between 2 mid-tier species I had been mediating for 3 weeks. It was intricate, careful work. Both parties had legitimate historical claims to overlapping resource zones, and both communicated in styles that made each side feel precise and left the other feeling unheard. Threading that kind of dispute requires patience of a very specific quality, not the patience of endurance, but the patience of listening past what people are saying toward what they are actually trying to protect. Those are not always the same thing. The OSIC delegate was in the chamber again. His delegation had no stake in this particular session. He sat in his delegation section with the particular stillness of a large species choosing to occupy less space than it could, watching. I mediated for 2 hours and 14 minutes. The dispute had a shape that was close to resolvable. Both parties were nearer to an agreement than either of them recognized, because they were measuring distance from their stated positions rather than from their actual interests. I stepped outside the community's standard resolution framework and reframed both sets of claims through a shared resource stewardship model, drawn from an Earth organizational approach developed for multi-party industrial zones that neither party had proposed but both could recognize as more favorable than the current state of permanent dispute. By the end of the session, they had agreed to a provisional framework. Both delegations left with the particular energy of people who arrived expecting a longer fight and discovered there was a different door they had not seen before. After the chamber cleared, the OSIC delegate crossed the floor. He stopped at 2 meters again, as he had in the conversation 3 weeks ago. The same measured distance. "The framework you used in that mediation," he said. "The shared stewardship model, that is not a community standard approach." "No," I said. "It comes from an Earth organizational system developed for multi-party resource disputes. We have used it domestically for about 60 years. It does not always work, but when the underlying interests are actually compatible and the obstacle is framing, it tends to." He processed that for a moment. "You have other frameworks like it," he said, not phrasing it as a question. "Several." He was quiet. Then, "The OSIC hegemony has an internal dispute, 2 member systems. It has been unresolved for 11 years. The community's standard arbitration process has not produced an outcome both systems are willing to accept, and the dispute has begun affecting trade and communication infrastructure in that region." I looked at him. "Send the file to Owen Hart," I said. "He will assess whether Earth's bilateral arbitration framework is applicable. If it is, he will send you our terms and a proposed process timeline." The OSIC delegate looked at me for a long moment. Something moved in his expression that I did not have a clean word for in any language I knew. Not gratitude, not quite respect. The specific acknowledgement of a person who has just been required to update a significant assumption and has chosen, rather than resist it, to simply update it. "You are a strange species," he said. "Yeah," I said, "we hear that." He left. I stood in the chamber for a moment longer. The afternoon session delegates were beginning to arrive. The room was filling again with the ordinary sound of business resuming, movement, low conversation, the mechanical sounds of a large building in use. In the 3 months since the second vote, 14 species had sent formal bilateral inquiry packets to Earth Station, not community-mediated arrangements, not requests filtered through the standard framework and review process. Direct contacts, species to species, asking to arrange terms directly. Smaller delegations mostly. Outer system species who had watched what happened in the chamber and drawn their own conclusions about what it meant to build a relationship directly with a civilization that had just demonstrated it could construct infrastructure while no one was paying attention to it. I read every request personally. I flagged 3 as genuinely promising. 2, I identified as situations where a bilateral arrangement would serve the requesting species' interests clearly and where Earth's framework was a good fit. 1 I recognized as a Velkari commercial interest operating through a different entity name. The contract structure was identical to 2 frameworks I had seen used before, with certain clauses modified but the underlying architecture unchanged. I sent it back unsigned with 1 annotation. "We have seen this structure before. Please contact Owen Hart's office for information on what Earth's bilateral agreements actually contain." The response came from the actual requesting party, a legitimate independent Velkari shipping operation that apparently had not known exactly what they were signing within 6 hours. Owen processed their real request inside 2 weeks and sent me a brief note that said it was one of the more straightforward agreements he had processed so far. Owen had hired 2 additional staff for his office without asking me first. Having calculated that I would approve the decision and that asking first would cost time neither of us had, both calculations were correct. I approved the hires after the fact with a message that said, "Good call." I gathered my materials from the mediator's table and moved to the arbiter's position for the afternoon session. The chair was better than the ambassador's bench I had occupied for 3 years. Owen had raised the issue during the transition, and Sunva had accommodated it with the efficiency of an administrator who had calculated that the cost of the accommodation was lower than the cost of the alternative. I opened my tablet. 4 files to review before the afternoon session opened. Petra's node upgrade authorization waiting for my signature. A second bilateral inquiry from the Murat Strand, far clearer than their first approach, which suggested someone on their team had studied how Earth's intake process actually worked and adjusted accordingly. A memo from Owen about the Ahun Federation's interest in Earth's participation in a joint research disclosure partnership, which was worth reading carefully before responding. A formal communication from Chief Arbiter Sunva regarding the upcoming anniversary review of Earth's arbitration seat, standard procedure, routine institutional record-keeping, the machinery of a very old organization running as it always runs. I filed Sunva's message. I would respond tomorrow. I looked across the chamber. 900 versions of intelligence settling into position for the afternoon's work. Arguments to be made. Disputes to be navigated. The slow, imperfect, necessary work of civilizations with different histories and different needs and different ideas about what fairness looks like, all sharing a galaxy and trying, more often than not to run each other over. It was not a fixed thing, this room. It was not a finished thing. It was the same room it had been the morning of the first vote, with the same stone and the same ceiling and the same scrubbers that needed repair, and something inside it had changed that the room itself would take years to fully understand. That was all right, I had time. I picked up my stylus. Here is the thing nobody tells you about getting a seat at the table. The table does not change. You just stop being the thing people wipe their boots on before they sit down. Chief Arbiter Sunva called the afternoon session to order. I read the first file. I started the work. Copy that.